Welcome to Fantasia, home of the Melodious. My name is Azallea, and today gonna be bringing you guys another post-duel commentary. Now this time playing in my round number 4 of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Non-Meta Tournament, co-hosted by my friend Zom and I. So looking at this opening hand that I have here, I actually opened up pretty well. I can go for fusion plays if I first move in solo into a soprano, and then summon the aria and go infuse there. I also have access to rank 4 plays where I can normal summon the Summoner Monk, pitch one copy of first movement solo to bring out any other level 4. Now here my opponent normal summons the Lumina and just enters the end phase, which is really weird to me because that's a really weak opening for Light Sworns. Then I saw the Eclipse Wyvern come out, which banished the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. Then that's when I realized, oh okay, my opponent is playing Chaos Dragons. So normal summoning the Lumina, of course, and passing is of course still just a really weak turn, but Chaos Dragons are kind of slow to start off their plays. They really need that graveyard setup before they can do anything. So knowing that I'm playing against Chaos Dragons, I decide, okay, well, the best line of play for me would be to go for a Shiberta. So I first move a solo into the soprano, and from there I could have just normal summoned the aria and gone for a fusion play, but I guess I decided to go for a Summoner Monk to discard the other copy of first movement solo to grab a cannon from my deck, because having a cannon and a soprano in circulation is very strong for this deck, especially because of Ritual Sanctuary, which allows us to loop them over and over. So I go for my Shiberta, the fusion Melodious monster, and I just attack with the Lumina. That's all I really need to do. I could, of course, I'm not just gonna leave it on the field, of course, because Lumina can mill more cards, and Lumina can bring back the Raiden that my opponent milled during their end phase. So here I'm pretty confident in my field right now, just with the Shiberta. I don't really banish anything from my opponent's graveyard because Chaos Chaos kind of functions more or less on having both light and darks in the grave, so I just kind of held off on the banishing effect until I saw both. Now here my opponent goes for Foolish Burial for a Chaos Sorcerer, so I'm thinking, okay, my opponent really needs darks in the grave, because why else would you be sending a Chaos Sorcerer from your deck to the graveyard, right? But then my opponent reveals the Raigeki, and then I believe this is where my opponent misplayed. My opponent should have just Raigeki'd first and then played the Foolish Burial. But anyway, the Raigeki baits out my Shiberta, and I banish the Lumina, the Raiden, and the Chaos Sorcerer that my opponent just sent. And wow, that Allure of Darkness was really bad for my opponent. Drawing to another Allure of Darkness, and I believe the White Dragon Wyvern Buster or something like that, which is of course a light monster, so yeah, that was pretty bad Allure. But anyway, like I was saying, with my Shiberta, I banished the 2 Light Sworns and the Chaos Sorcerer, and did not banish the Eclipse Wyvern because, of course, if you know what Eclipse Wyvern does, if it gets banished, whatever card that it banished gets added to the person's hand, right? So the Eclipse Wyvern banished the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon from the deck, so if I banish the Eclipse Wyvern, the Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon gets added to my opponent's hand. So I didn't want that to happen, so just banished everything else. And yeah, so my opponent probably shouldn't have played that Allure, probably should have just like held on to it. I don't know what my opponent was trying to do, because I don't really think there could have been any explosive play that could have come out from that. But anyway, I draw into a cannon, which is really nice because then I can summon my aria, special summon the cannon from my hand, and go for a rank 4 play, which is pretty good. So I believe I was contemplating Fairy Trigger or Bujinte Tsukiyomi, because of course I can just normal summon I can special summon the Fairy Trigger or Bujinte Tsukiyomi in attack mode and just attack over my opponent's monster by dropping Honest and then using their effect, right? If it was Tsukiyomi, I'll use its effect, discard Sapphier to draw 2 more cards, which, to be fair, was actually a pretty good move now that I look at it. But yeah, I decided to go for the Utopia Lightning, go for that damage, trying to finish off the game, since I see that my opponent has, well, no cards on the field or in their hand, and that Lila was their last card. Now my opponent top decks, and that Pot of Avidity coming out, shuffling 3 of their banished monsters back into the deck to draw 1 card. Now, little minor thing that my opponent did was they shuffled back the Red Eyes Darkness Battle Dragon, which I believe they shouldn't have. They should have shuffled back the Lumina. But anyway, my opponent top decks the Blackluster Soldier Envoy of the Beginning from that pot of avidity. Isn't that crazy? So they banished the Eclipse Wyvern, which, so going back to what I was talking about earlier, if they didn't return the Red Eyes Darkness Battle Dragon, when the Eclipse Wyvern got banished, it would have added it back to their hand, right? So it would have been really good for them in terms of setting up. And if they get any other dragon on the field, they can easily banish it for the Red Eyes Darkness Battle Dragon, and they'd have 2 beat sticks on the field, essentially. So, looking at my hand there, I drew into the Hymn of Light, so I'm hoping for a Ben 10 next turn. But the reason why I didn't set the Honest is because Blackluster Soldier can actually attack twice. If it destroys my monster, it can attack once again, so regardless, I'm taking 3,000 damage to the face. Then my opponent top decks the Charge of the Light Brigade, adding a Raiden from their deck to their hand, which is, oh god, that just, at this point, I have 1 turn left, essentially. So, Raiden milling that Plague Spreader from the deck to the graveyard, which is really good. Plague Spreader, definitely a really good card. And, yeah, so, look at my hand here, I don't really have any plays. So what I could do is I can Hymn of Light, tribute the Arya and the Honest for the Saphra, and use Saphra to attack over the Raiden. If I did that, then I could go into the end phase, draw 2 cards, discard 1. I think that's what I would have done. But the problem with that is the next turn my opponent could just banish Saphra with BLS's effect, which would have been bad. But now that I think about it, that probably would have saved me for like another turn, because BLS can't attack that turn. But okay, that's completely fine. That's one play that I could definitely do. The other thing I could do with this hand is I can normal summon the Arya and attack into the BLS and drop the Honest, just to get rid of that Blackluster Soldier, because he's been hindering my plays. He's just been sitting there and I can't get over it, right? So he's a big problem card for me right now. So that's what I decide to ultimately do. So I normal summon the Arya, and I'm gonna drop the Honest on it, on his Blackluster Soldier, just to get rid of it. Now, of course, my opponent can just attack over Arya with the Raiden, but that's the least of my worries right now. I'd rather take 100 damage than to leave that Blackluster Soldier on the field. So I'm looking at my hand, I'm just thinking, okay, I just need 1 more card. I just need Ben 10 or Saphra. That's all I need. Pre-preparation of Rites would have been nice. I guess preparation of Rites would have been too, but okay, that's getting on a little tangent right now. So my opponent drew 1 card, and I'm not too worried about it, to be honest. My opponent could actually just put it back to the top of their deck and summon Plague Spreader, and just attack with Raiden and attack with Plague Spreader for some chip damage, right? Because I'm already really low. Now the problem with my graveyard is I only have 2 spell cards in there, the 2 copies of First Movement Solo, so that's really bad for me, because even if I drew into a Ritual Sanctuary, it would not help. Okay, so it looks like my opponent is going for the Plague Spreader Zombie, putting that card they just drew back on the top of their deck to summon their Plague Spreader. 400 attack, mass amounts of damage about to be coming in, right? So the good thing is that both Raiden and the Plague Spreader are, well, tuners. So that means that they can't go for a Synchro Summon, right? You can't go for a Synchro Summon with 2 tuners. But I'm being chipped down and I'm on a timer now, so 1100 life points, very, very bad for me. And looking back at it now, I think my play with the Arya and Honest was probably the better one, because if I left the Blackluster Soldier on the field, my opponent would still control it after banishing my Saphra, right? So there's that. Here during the end phase, I don't know what caused this little delay. I think my opponent was just checking out something somewhere else. But yeah, now I noticed that my opponent has another Plague Spreader in the graveyard. Plague Spreader, of course, is just a really good card overall. It's really great for making level 6 and level 8 synchros. Usually they're comboed with what was it called? Destiny Hero Malicious, I believe was the name. Yeah, to make level 8 synchros, which is really nice. Now, oh man, and I draw into the Vanity's Emptiness. The one trap card that I play in this deck that I don't want to see at this time, I draw into. So I didn't want to quit on my opponent, so I'm just going to let my opponent attack me for a game, but set the Van Exemptness just in case, you know, make them worry a little. Make them think it's a mirror force or something like that. But yeah, it's also because I want to see what my opponent's gonna do with this turn. Just see if I can get any more information about my opponent's deck, because I haven't seen them summon anything from the extra deck. I haven't really seen anything except just milling some cards and summoning a Blackluster Soldier, really. So yeah, just trying to see how many cards they're running in their deck, what different kinds. It just looks like a fairly standard Chaos Dragon build with Light Pulsar Dragon, with the Light Sworns, with Plague Spreader. But yeah, that does it for game 1, so let's hop right into game number 2. Alright, so for game number 2, I believe I decide to go first. Now, there's a really important reason why I decide to go first here. One, because I learned from my previous rounds that, you know, this deck actually kind of likes setting up. And the second reason is because of a card that I sided in that you'll see right here with Cyber Angel Benten. Now, Benten, you can see it on the screen right now, Artifact Lancia. Now, Artifact Lancia is a level 5 light fairy type monster, and it is a very powerful card because during my opponent's turn, I can tribute it from my hand, and it basically doesn't allow my opponent to banish any cards, right? Which is very, very powerful tool to have, especially against a deck like Chaos. So Chaos Dragons, they of course need to banish things from the graveyard, and if you drop the Lancia, it's basically saying no, you can't play your deck. It's very mean to say the least, but it is also a very nice tool to have in this deck. I really do love siding Lancia because it stops so many decks. It stops Chaos decks, it stops Infernoids, it stops a lot of decks that just like banishing things, right? So when my opponent plays a Twin Twister and discards a monster, I decide, okay, well, this is a perfect time to just activate Lancia, so my opponent can't just surprise banish that monster from the graveyard first and then special summon, you know, their Black Collar Serpents or something like that. Because all the summons of the dragons don't start a chain, they just banish and summon it immediately, right? There's no response window for me to do anything. So it's always important to drop it early. And because I dropped it because Saphra's on the field, a light monster was sent from my hand or my deck to the graveyard. In this case, Artifact Lancia was sent from my hand. I can, during the end phase, just add it back from my graveyard. So I now have it established an infinite loop of Artifact Lancia, preventing my opponent from really playing the game. So I had an Instant Fusion in my hand, decided to use it, summon the Norden, bring back the Arya, and I believe I can go for a rank 4 play here. I don't remember if I go for Fairy Trigger or Utopia Lightning, but we'll see right here. I'm in a really good spot right now. I'm in a very commanding position with a very nice field, and I have the Saphra and the Lancia loop going on. So yeah, okay, ultimately I decide to go for the Utopia, the whole Utopia package with 4 materials under Lightning. Now, this is very good for me, of course, because I'm going to be dealing mass amounts of damage. So I just normal summon the Soprano and decide, okay, I'm going to get that extra 1400 damage in. It doesn't really matter if my opponent summons something next turn, attacks over it, because I do control both a Saphra and a Lightning on the field, right? And Lightning still has 2 materials, so whatever my opponent summons is probably going to get smacked in the face by Lightning. Okay, so on my opponent's turn, I decide, okay, on the opponent's draw phase, they only have 800 life points. I'm just going to drop that Lancia right now, prevent them from banishing anything, because their graveyard's already pretty much established for at least 1 or 2 plays. So my opponent just normal summons the Eclipse Wyvern, and of course they can't do anything else. They can't special summon their cards because they can't banish anything from their graveyard, and they attack over the Soprano. Now, Saphra during the end phase, I can add the Lancia back, but in this position where my opponent has 800 life points and I have a Lightning with 2 materials under it, I just decided, you know what, this is completely fine. I'm just gonna go ahead and draw some cards and try to set up my own hand and graveyard, right? So enter the battle phase and attack the Eclipse Wyvern, taking game number 2. Didn't even use the effect of lightning. So yeah, that does it for game number 2. Let's just hop right into game number 3. Alright, so for game number 3, I don't think I changed up the side deck much at all. My goal here is still to just establish that Artifact Lancia loop as soon as possible. Even after my opponents set up their field, Lancia will still be nice to prevent them from continuing to put monsters on board, right? So my opponent lets me go first, surprisingly, and I open, well, with the combo. I have my Ritual Play in my hand. Now, of course, there's different things I could do if it was a different matchup. If it was a different matchup, I could just search for a cannon, normal summon the Soprano, special summon the cannon, and go for a rank 4 play, or I can go for a Shiberta, ending with a Saphra and a Shiberta, which is pretty strong. But because I'm going against the Chaos Dragons, I decide, well, you know, I'm gonna search the Lancia and just keep looping it, because it's been working. It worked for game 2 and helped bring me back, so I'm hoping that'll carry me through game 3 as well. Now, Saphra allowed me to draw 2 cards, now to discard 1, and I had to decide between Soprano and Summoner Monk. I don't think the decision was too hard, but I know what I was thinking at the time. I was thinking, okay, if I draw into a cannon next turn or something of that sort, I can normal summon the Soprano and special summon the cannon and go for some plays there. But then I thought, okay, well, if I just discard the Soprano, right, and I kept the Summoner Monk, I play more spell cards in my deck than I do cannon, of course. So weighing those odds together, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep the Summoner Monk because the chances of me drawing any spell card is gonna be pretty high, right? So I can go for basically a rank 4 play by Summoner Monk summoning a level 4 monster from my deck and going from there. So my opponent goes for a Twin Twisters, trying to pop that Ritual Sanctuary, and then I drop the Artifact Lancia, just saying nope, not going to happen at all. Not gonna have any summons, that is. I can't protect the Ritual Sanctuary with it. Okay, so my opponent goes for a Reinforcements of the Army, adding the Raiden from their deck to their hand, and Raiden gets to mill. Now, one interesting thing about this, oh wow, actually that was a bad mill. That was a Twin Twister and a Solar Recharge. That's like all spells in their graveyard. Raiden gets to mill again at the end phase. So one interesting thing is that against Lightsworns, Saphra can actually trigger from my opponent. Even if I didn't have the Lancia, Saphra would be triggering because my opponents, they milled with Raiden, and you saw at the end phase there, they milled a Raiden off of their Raiden. Now Raiden is a light monster, and it was sent from the deck to the graveyard, so Saphra can trigger naturally that way as well. But in this case, she would have procced anyway because I did have an Artifact Lancia that I sent from my hand to the grave. But yeah, anyway, my decision to keep Summoner Monk was actually paying off here because I could discard the first movement solo that I drew and summon the Cannon from my deck. Of course, Cannon, again, just to get her out of the deck and into circulation. It's very important to keep Soprano and Cannon in circulation so you can, hopefully, if you get another Ritual Sanctuary, you can continue your plays. So here I went for the Castell. I didn't want to just leave that Raiden on the field. I could have gone for Utopia Lightning, but I thought, let's switch it up just a little bit. Just summoning Utopia Lightning every turn isn't really that great, right? And putting cards back into my opponent's deck is actually pretty good because it's just less chance that they can draw into those power cards, right, like Raigeki and things like that. So my opponent putting the card they just drew back on the top of their deck to summon the Plague Spreader zombie. So I thought my opponent was going to wall up here, but they start summoning Plague Spreader in attack mode, so I was kind of confused. Anyway, they normal summon the Raiden, they mill another Plague Spreader zombie, so I was like, oh, okay, well, again, fortunately, both of them are tuners, Raiden and Plague Spreader, so they can't go for a level 6 synchro play. I still believe that they should have put Plague Spreader into defense mode. There's nothing on Plague Spreader that restricts its battle position from when it's summoned. So this was just a little weird to me. I don't know why. Actually, I can understand why. Basically, my opponent's using Plague Spreader to stack their deck. To put cards they want to mill with Raiden during the end phase back at the top of their deck. I still believe they should have I still believe they should have summoned the Plague Spreaders into defense mode, but that's just me. Okay. Anyway, Plague Spreader does get banished though if you summon it with its effect, so these Plague Spreaders are going to end up banished for my opponent. And wow, leaving my opponent with 100 life points. So one important thing to note is that last turn during my opponent's end phase, I forgot to add Lancia back to my hand. I accidentally right-clicked when it asked if I wanted to activate Sapphire's effect, so I'm like, oh, well then. And now this turn, my opponent just summons a Chaos Sorcerer from the hand out of nowhere. Now my opponent would have been in an amazing position if I didn't have that Solemn Strike. Now I sided in the Solemn Strike. I only play Vanities in the main deck, so yeah, this is it was a really good exchange of games. It was a really good match, and if I didn't have that Solemn Strike at the end, my opponent would have just went for the Chaos Sorcerer and banished my Sapphire's, and of course, I believe I still would have been able to come back because I drew into the Terraforming. I could go for the Ritual Sanctuary, grab back the Soprano, add back the Cannon, go for Utopia, and just attack over the Chaos Sorcerer. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it, and special thanks to my opponent Nero for the amazing match against Chaos Dragons. I didn't even realize the interaction between Plague Spreader and the Light Swarms until like just now when I was watching through my recording. So yeah, that was actually really great, and I learned something new. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe for more Melodious content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.